Great.
All right, so Tim, go ahead and tell me your name and what you do for a living.
Yeah, my name is Tim Wright, and I am a tour guide. I'm the owner of a company called Addicts Adams, which is essentially a walking tour company here in Washington, D.C. So I'm a tour guide.
All right, so we're here in the Shaw neighborhood, and you were mentioning a lot about like Black Theater and Black Broadway. Can you kind of give me some insight into what you're talking about there?
Yeah, so Black Broadway was a name given to this part of town here in Washington, D.C. And you think of Broadway, most people think of New York. But obviously we're not in New York, we're in Washington, D.C. And so the whole idea was it was a center of Black culture, mostly around entertainment, music, yes, some theater, but mostly, we're from the Howard Theater was mostly known for music, and so it was a whole culture around music and entertainment that ended up being called Black Broadway, and it was really this part of DC, this, we call it a neighborhood, that was around, rather than their official dates, but an 80 to 100 year period here in this neighborhood.
So you were mentioning that you're kind of an expert in the history of it. So if we were on a tour right now and we were standing in front of the theater, kind of like how would you kind of start it off? Like what's the initial thing you're going to tell people that have no idea what you're talking about?
Right, yeah, which is like most of my guests. Oh, that's not true. Like if you sign up for the tour, you have some idea what it's about, right? Because of the title. But yeah, I think you're right. Like I'm a historian that you like activates history through being a tour guide, right? So like I activate the history part through tours, and so we start here because this was really the first full service theater for Black artists in the United States. Because when it was built, we were segregated as a country, so we had separate facilities for Black artists and separate facilities for white artists. So this is one of the top facilities for Black artists. So that's why I start here at Howard Theater.
Interesting. So now, can you tell me like a little bit about like Black culture in DC? Maybe, to be honest, some people around the country don't realize this is like there's a lot of Black people here, and why? Do you have any insight into that?
Well, yeah, that is true. Yeah, so DC, the first census we were majority Black was in the 1950s. So like 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. It becomes a majority Black district. We're a federal territory, we're not a state. So it's like a city and a district kind of in one, like Washington, D.C. And because of, Howard University, which is nearby, because of D.C. always had Black wealth and a significant Black population, because of Black leadership in the 1970s and 1980s, it becomes a place where it's sort of known you can come and have, a middle-class lifestyle. And so it becomes, in the 1970s, it was 71% African-American. People started calling it Chocolate City. And so, but it has a long legacy of, Black culture, Black history, Black wealth, all the way back to, like, the Civil War era. So it's not a new thing. It's just that DC, like, physically has changed over the years. The boundaries have changed, the culture has changed. It's still changing right now. But always through that history has always been, Black culture in DC.
Interesting. Now you mentioned Black Broadway and stuff. What has come off of Black Broadway that maybe might be in the public lexicon that we're not, things that started here that maybe are known around the world?
I mean, probably the most obvious one is Duke Ellington. So I'm like looking off camera and there's a mural of Duke Ellington behind me. There's a statue of Duke Ellington. We have buildings called Duke Ellington, and a lot of people associate him with New York. But he's from Washington, D.C. He got started in D.C. So I could name 1,000 artists that are from, or maybe not 1,000. I could name a bunch of artists that are from Washington, D.C. that are in the public lexicon. But also, genres of music like go-go music, like jazz music, like punk music, like hardcore music, like all were part of D.C. culture, and then we were exported to the rest of the world. Like go-go music started here in D.C., exported to the United States and to the world. And so, does everyone know about it? No, but it did. It made it out worldwide, and every year more and more people, because of the internet, because of social media, because of the way the world is now, like it's easier to share that stuff than it was in the past. Whereas you had to like be here to see it, and now you don't necessarily have to be in a certain place to experience a little bit of that place's like culture.
Now we're standing in front of the Howard Theater. There's also Howard University.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, can you tell me who Howard was? What's this name?
Yeah, so Otis Howard, right? He was in the Union Army, right, during the Civil War. So, Confederacy's other side, he was fighting for the Union, the United States. And then after the war was over, he helped found a couple universities, and one was named after him, Howard University. Howard Theater was, named after the most trusted institution in the neighborhood, which was Howard University. So it got named after the university, which is named after the person.
So in terms of the modern culture, I mean, we had a lot of things go down a couple of years ago. If somebody's coming to DC right now, they might be wondering how open it is. Is there, honestly, people might even be wondering, is there racial tensions going on? Can you give kind of like some insight into like the cultural kind of political aspect of what's going on if you're like coming here to visit and stuff? Is there like a war going on in town? Because a couple of years ago there was, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, I would call it like, I think you're talking about 2020.
Yeah, I'm talking about 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it an uprising or whatever, revolt, whatever you want to call it. And that happened, and it's not the first time it's happened in DC. It's not the first time it happened in history. Like, people have uprisings and revolts all the time for different reasons. And for 2020, we had I don't know what people called it, like racial reckoning, whatever people want to call it. But we had that in DC too, and it was we had a period we had to reflect on like what was happening in the country and what was happening in Washington DC. And so, I guess the question is like, is it it's not 2020 anymore, it's 2023 now when I'm doing this video, right? It's a different time now. It's like DC open. I guess it depends on what you consider open. Like a lot during the first part of the pandemic, like a lot of like everybody else, like a lot of businesses shut down temporarily or permanently, and a lot of people that worked in the office don't do that anymore. And so like we're transformed. And what is this era? Like we don't know yet. Like it's to be determined what we call this era. Like we don't know. We're not even sure if like what's going to happen with office culture downtown, what's going to happen with retail downtown, what's going to happen with housing. Like I can't tell you the answer. Like no one knows the answer, right?
24 remains to be seen what's going to happen. But in this moment right now,
yeah.
Is it a good time to visit DC?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you that we had something. I need to look this up. I think 19 or 20 million visitors last year, which is like what it was in 2019 or 2018. So I'll let those numbers speak for themselves. Of course, I'm a tour guide. I want people to come to Washington DC. People come. I have guests every week, and so according to them, yeah, it's a good time, and I agree. Like it's never a bad time to come to DC. Like we're the nation's capital. Something always is happening here. It's not any other city. Like we were talking about this before the camera rolled. Like DC is different from every other part of the United States, the East Coast. And so, yeah.
That leads into my last question. Here's the chance to promote your business.
There we go.
Please give all the contact information if somebody wants to come and visit. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, anytime's a good time to come visit. I have tours in January through December. And some people like coming in the hot months, some people like coming in the winter months, some people like coming in between. And I'm happy to do it all the time. I live here. So the company is called Addicts Adams, named after Crispus Attucks from Massachusetts and John Adams, who ended up being the president of the United States. And it's a mix. It's neighborhoods, monuments, memorials, Capitol Hill, and everywhere in between.
What's the website?
Yeah, addictsadams.com, AddictsAdams.com, addictsadams.com. Then you'll see, when you click on it, you'll see my face, that's the website.
Hey, it's great talking with you, Tim.
Good to talk with you, Mike. I appreciate you, man.